Drew, and then you.
Okay.
Let's do it.
And we're live. Episode 450. What's up, everybody?
We're live.
Y'all, thank you for coming to the YouTube stream because it's worth it this week because we're going to have some supplementary entertainment to
That's right.
tide us through the different things. All right, here we go. In 3, 2, 1. And welcome to episode 450 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Andrew Swafford.
Michael O'Malley.
And in today's episode, we have a very special, 450th episode for y'all. We had 3 of our relatively frequent co-host folks, whatever you want to call them.
Panelists.
Friends of the pod.
Friends of the pod, whatever you want to say. Pick, initially I was like, it was going to be like a Secret Santa movie thing, but then, God love him. We all love Seth, who was in charge of it. He just told me who everybody's pick was. So,
also, even if you didn't know, it would be glaringly obvious who picked what movie based on the established brands of the 3 people in question.
It is true. Yeah, no, honestly, it like lines up, which honestly is pretty great.
We need a more homogenous talent base so that this sort of thing isn't quite as predictable.
Well, what I also found to be really funny, is that I thought they were gonna try to find some way to draw names, and Seth just asked who wanted who, and the people who got each of us just was like, I want that person. So if that makes anybody feel better, there you go.
Aww.
But all right, we're gonna kick it off we're gonna open up with Reid's movie. Work with me a second here as I go ahead and load this puppy up. Reid, and let's go.
Oh no, we got no audio.
Oh no.
Are you hearing it?
I hear it.
Oh no.
Let me do this. Hold on. We'll have a little technical glitch.
This is all part of the experience. Yeah.
It's all part of the charm.
I'm assuming this will be cut out.
We got the kinks worked out.
No. Let's leave it in. Let's show just how deeply incompetent we are. All right. Let's maybe putting it in a Chrome tab will work a little bit better. All right.
Hey y'all, it's Reid popping in to explain a couple of the reasons I chose for Michael to watch White Men Can't Jump. Aside from it being one of my all-time favorite movies, I just thought I wanted to pick something that would actually be a good time and be something fun and not a chore for Michael to watch. So even if he doesn't love it, I thought it would at least be a fun one. And then I also thought it'd be a nice tie-in with the remake that just came out. Not that we should go watch that, but at least it's a little more in the conversation right now, something that some people are talking about, surely. And so I thought, what better time to revisit this masterpiece instead of watching the Jack Harlow remake that came out. But enjoy talking about one of Ron Shelton's many great sports movies, and I can't wait to listen. Thanks, guys.
Wait, Jack Harlow is in the remake?
He is. He's the titular one.
Yeah, I'm never watching it then. Man, what a piece of trash.
Wait, what's your hot take on Jack Harlow? I know very little about him.
He's just boring. There's nothing. He's like a charisma void. I would not want to watch a movie. I'm presumably like the Woody Harrelson character. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Terrible.
The Woody Harrelson character.
Not even worse than not having Woody Harrelson is having someone who's like the antithesis of Woody Harrelson. So do I just talk about the movie now?
Yeah, introduce White Men Can't Jump to us.
Yeah, so I watched White Man Can't Jump, and I'm glad Reid said what he did because I did have fun. I did love it. It was a great movie. So I don't know how much this movie needs to be introduced. I knew what this movie was about it feels like for my entire life, which basically it has been my entire life because I was 2 when this movie came out. But just for anyone who doesn't know what this movie's about, it stars Woody Harrelson as the titular white man, and then Wesley Snipes is not a white man in this movie. And basically, like, the movie opens with there's like a street ball game going on, or it's not street ball; they're in a court, but like a open air court, and they're playing basketball or whatever. This predominantly black group of folks, and then there's Woody Harrelson sitting there. Actually, the movie opens with Woody Harrelson arriving, I believe. Whatever the case, eventually, like, Wesley Snipes' character, who is like big trash talking. Like, everybody eventually starts to pick on Woody Harrelson, and so they challenge each other to a I don't know if it's free throws or what, but they're I'm not a sports person, and I didn't actually look at what part of the court that they were standing in. But they're basically shooting the ball until the person misses. The person who misses loses. Is it what?
Are they playing horse?
No, it's all from the same part of the court every time. So I think it's just free throws because there's no tricks or anything. I do know what horse is. I'm that savvy. Whatever the case, money becomes involved. Like, there's a big bet, and eventually Woody Harrelson's character wins because Wesley Snipes' character misses. And basically, Woody Harrelson was hustling the whole situation where he was pretending not to be good. He was pretending to be this, like, dorky dude who actually is really, really good at basketball. And this is apparently something he does. He goes and he is like do they call it like a basketball shark? I mean, it's like a pool shark, but
yeah,
like whatever basketball equivalent that is.
Yeah, like a ringer or something.
Yeah, and so Wesley Snipes' character catches up with him when Woody Harrelson's back at his apartment with his girlfriend Rosie Perez, Woody Harrelson's girlfriend Rosie Perez, and who is studying to be on Jeopardy. It's important to note. And Wesley Snipes breaks in. He's like, "Hey, man, what the hell? You just swindled me out of all this money." And one thing leads to another, and eventually they decide we're going to team up and we're going to, like, team hustle everybody. We're going to go all around. I believe this is Los Angeles, right? We're going to go all around the city, and we're going to do the same thing where we're going to play this game where I'm going to act as if I'm this big braggadocious dude. Wesley Snipes, I'm going to act as if I'm this big braggadocious dude, and we'll put a large sum of money on the ground and say, you can pick any weight, and we'll beat you for this money. And they always have Woody Harrelson stage just coming in looking like totally lame, not good. And so inevitably people always pick him to be on Wesley Snipes' team, and they go and, like, rack up quite a bit of money. And that's kind of like how the movie starts. It's almost like it's like a gambling movie. It's like The Hustler or something, but with basketball. And so, like a lot of those types of movies, there's all sorts of twists and turns and changes in allegiance and double crosses and all that sort of stuff. But it's also about basketball. So it's like this kind of like sports movie. And it also, like, eventually becomes like a rom-com relationship movie because Rosie Perez and Woody Harrelson, like, start to, like, they're a couple the whole time. But, like, there's drama and comedy in their relationship because Woody Harrelson, it becomes clear, is like a compulsive gambler basically, and can't stop doing these hustles. It's always one more time, and so he ends up winning lots of money and then losing lots of money, and this is putting her through the ringer while she's trying to, like, they're like on the run from, like, creditors basically, the mob ish. They're like hitmen basically. They're on the run from, it seems like, because of his gambling problems. And so they're trying to escape this. They're trying to, get enough money so that they can move into something nice. Wesley Snipes is kind of like doing a ton of different, like, side gigs, and is basically in a similar position where they're trying to move out of the neighborhood that they're in, and by winning money. In addition to it, he does, like, construction stuff. And eventually Rosie Perez is on Jeopardy, and there's actually like an Alex Trebek like whole Jeopardy sequence.
Is Alex Trebek in it?
He's actually in it,
Nice.
making a rare appearance, you know. And I don't know, like the movie is like really funny throughout. Like it is like on a moment by moment basis a comedy in the sense of characters are always quipping with each other. But I think in the grand scope, it ends up being a fairly like dramatic movie in the sense of it like truly takes these characters seriously too. And like it takes seriously the stakes of like what is it like to be a person who is like this compulsive like risk taker, or this person who you never know who you can trust because you're always hustling people and they may be hustling you. And like it's serious about that as much as the movie is like very funny in a lot of different parts. And I thought it was great. I didn't realize when I was watching this that this was directed by Ron Shelton. Or I did, but I didn't realize that Ron Shelton was Ron Shelton, and had directed also Bull Durham, which has a similar thing in the sense of it's a sports context for a certain kind of genre film, in that case a romantic comedy, but that is very serious about this kind of like almost philosophical, like existential, like character piece, you know, where like what does it mean to be a character in this kind of genre trappings, you know, whether that's romance or gambling, and also like in what ways does the game that you're playing, whether that's baseball in Bull Durham or basketball in White Man Can't Jump, like in what way does that game like kind of symbolically lock into that, like what philosophies undergird like what the game is. And it's like weirdly profound about like those sorts of things, both Bull Durham and this movie. And also just being like really like dialogue is just really florid and like or like I don't know, poetic in ways that, you know, wouldn't normally be the case in a sports movie.
I remember like this is easily like my favorite Wesley Snipes movie. He's a lot of fun in this movie.
100%, yeah.
He's like very manic, but he's just like he's almost doing like I wish he kind of like got more roles like this rather than kind of like his like more tough guy roles, because he's like a tough guy in this one, but he also like he's really smart, he's really funny, he's just constantly like running his mouth, but like the back and forth that he's giving and taking is really clever, and he's just and honestly like just the physicality. I remember like watching them play basketball, like Wesley Snipes, it like looks like somebody who would be playing basketball. It doesn't look like an actor who's just like doing his best.
How do they film the basketball? Are you actually
very well
sports happen in front of you?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is actually it's Wesley Snipes and Woody Harrelson. Although, like, there's a lot of the whole like the ball goes above the frame and then comes back into the basket, you know. Right. So I imagine like, you know, there's a little bit of that, which you just have to do. But like a lot of it is very physical. Like you see a lot of games played, and there's this one game that's like, I guess it's like a regional tournament or something like that. That's very physical. You know, it's like a game that is like this kind of simmering like violence is like undergirding the competition. And like, you know, there's a real, like you can follow beat by beat. Like they don't show you the whole game usually. Usually it's kind of montage like, but for the bits that you see, you follow bit by bit like the actual things that are happening. It's not just like this weird like impressionistic thing. You know, there's a real respect for like the actual bodies and movement. You know, that goes beyond simply like, you know, like there's a way that you could write this movie that is exclusively a gambling movie, and the sport is just the excuse to have the gambling movie. And that's not this. Like this is still like sincerely a sports movie. But it also finds a way to make that organically feel like of a piece with, you know, The Hustler, or I guess probably a better example, to be honest, would be the sequel to The Hustler, The Color of Money. But yeah, I don't know. I really like this movie. I liked it a ton. Andrew, you haven't seen it, I guess?
I have seen like the first 20, 30 minutes of it on like daytime TV.
Man,
the daytime TV.
What remains of the dialogue?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't seen the real version. Couldn't tell you. But I remember finding it very compelling. I would like to watch the whole thing.
Dude, you gotta watch the whole thing. Also, I haven't really talked about it this much except my little summary, but like Rosie Perez is incredible in this movie, and her little subplot involving Jeopardy is awesome. Like, I love it. Like the whole movie, she's like, just like, do you know 5 foods that begin with the letter Q? I do. And like, it's just stuff like that. Like the whole movie, but also it's not like it is a joke in the sense that it's funny, but it's not a joke in the sense of like, it's not at the expense of her character. Like she's a genuinely interesting character. Like she has this throughout the whole movie, like she's the smartest person in the movie, like in the room all the time, and not like the smartest in the sense of she's trying to like connive people like Wesley Snipes and Woody Harrelson are, but she's like the person with her head on, like, not in the clouds, like, and her feet on the ground, right? Like she's like a person that truly knows what it means to survive, but also she understands that, at least like for the context of like this span of time that this movie encapsulates, she knows that in order for her to survive, she has to put up with people who don't know how to survive. And like her attraction to Woody Harrelson is really interesting because you can tell like the whole time that she's like this close to being fed up with him, like the whole movie. And she keeps finding reasons and ways for him to be compelling enough to her that she stays with him. I don't know. She's really good. I have not seen Rosie Perez in that many things. Like, of course, Do the Right Thing and a couple other movies, but she's really good in this.
She's a good actor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I really love, like, Ron Shelton has really, like, is just kind of underrated. I think he's underrated mainly because, you know, like, there's such a sports movies have like such a very like specific type. You know, you think like when you think of sports movies, you're like immediately going to like Hoosiers or
they're all like inspirational, like underdog.
Yeah, like underdog. Yeah, like Hoosiers
Rudy.
or The Natural, the
Rudy,
like more contemporary, like Coach Carter, like stuff like that, where it's like people overcoming stuff. And like you have that element to sports, like, you know, sure. But like, especially in like something like in this, and especially in Bull Durham, like what I love about Bull Durham is that Ron Shelton, one, I mean, he was a baseball player, so he like understands the like nature of baseball players, but like he understands just like how like just kind of silly they are. Baseball players are easily the most fun athletes because basketball players generally take themselves way too seriously, and football players, like the hits to the head add up after a while.
Yeah. Where's Ron Shelton's football movie?
Yeah,
does he have one?
I don't think so. He has Tin Cup, which is golf. But like Bull Durham, like baseball players are just like silly and stupid, and they're really entertaining. And like I like that Bull Durham like leans into like just the like just the silly stupidity of baseball players, because they're really, like, honestly,
yeah, like Tim Robbins' character in that movie.
He's so
it's
silly.
Hilarious.
like they're just the silliest. Like they crack me up because, you know, like I spent a year with my dad's team, and like baseball players are just so goddamn stupid, but they're so funny. Like I remember he had this one player who he gave each of them like 20 or 25 bucks, and he's like, all right, so this is your meal money for the day. Like this is supposed to cover, you know, we're gonna get a meal later, but this is supposed to cover your lunch. And between him giving the money to the player and us like stopping the bus at the place to go eat, that player had lost all of his $25. and so he gets off the bus. He's like, Coach, I don't have anything to eat. And he's like, where's the $25? Like, I lost it. We like betting and stuff. And you're just like, and so so we're like in the Burger King. He's sitting there eating nothing. You're just like, how did you, like, it was a 10-minute period. How did you lose $25 in 10 minutes? And like it's like that stuff. And like I feel like Ron Shelton like understands that and like sees that warmly. And I think that comes through in the movies because it's not, you know, he doesn't make it about like, you know, sports are like help you overcome adversity. It's more just like, no, like sports is being silly and like doing this like kind of like fun activity that you get paid to do.
But it's like that's the thing about sports that I think a lot of people, including myself, sometimes find alienating, which is that it's like a fundamentally silly enterprise because it's leisure, like it's a game, but people end up taking it so seriously, and they describe this huge amount of meaning and personal investment to it, and not just the players but the spectators. And I think like the interesting thing about both of these Ron Shelton movies that I've seen is that, like, unlike a lot of sports movies, they're able to convey to me, a person who's not inherently built, like, bought into the premise of a sport, like they're able to convey to me, like, why is this important, like, and I mean, like, it's like kind of embarrassing the ways that he gets me to do it, because like in Bull Durham, there's a literal English teacher explaining the significance of baseball the whole time, like,
Yeah.
and like, okay, but like it's actually really good, like it's this really thoughtful explanation of like, why is this game, what is it about this game that accrues meaning. And I think that like it's like I mentioned existentialism earlier, and I think that it is existential. Like, a game is absurd, like it's a series of arbitrary limitations that we set on each other's interactions, and we do it for fun, but because we're human and we like have this capacity to make meaning, like that silly arbitrariness becomes something that has this gravity to it. I don't know, like it's compelling, like when he does it, and like White Man Can't Jump, like again, like pick up basketball on like random like concrete courts, like that, like takes on this, like within the context of the movie and within the context of these characters' lives, like it's nearly life or death, like in a literal way in the movie. And it's done in a way that makes me care about basketball, not just because of the characters, but it makes me feel like I care about basketball when I'm watching it, which I don't really. Like, I mean, I enjoy watching basketball occasionally, and the same as baseball. I enjoy watching baseball occasionally, but like I genuinely don't care about it in and of itself, but I do when I watch these movies.
Yeah, and I'm glad that he did pick up basketball, because it doesn't, you don't have like the like capitalistic constraints of like college or the NBA. Like pick up,
right?
You feel like it's very like, all of these things are dictated by the people on the court. Like the rules, the limitations, how far you're going to go. All of that's dictated within those confines. So it's a much more approachable like way to go about it.
And you can just wander in too.
That's true. Like Woody Harrelson. And I mean, it's an interesting contrast to Bull Durham. Like a kind of central kind of tragedy is putting it too strong, but like that's about a minor league team, and a bunch of these characters have never been to like the show, right? Like the majors, or some of them have been there briefly and then come back to the minors. And so there's a sort of like yearning for, like, there is this possibility, this lightning striking possibility that they will make it. And so like that's kind of like a poetic tension within the movie of like there's all these characters that are more or less like stuck in this limbo, right? Like they think this is not where any of them wanted to end up, but it's where most of them will end up. But in White Man Can't Jump, what we see of the sport is all that there is. Like there's nothing that they aspire to, like they themselves create what they're aspiring to, which is to make more money. But the money, is not an inherent part of what they're doing. Like there's no framework for them making money. They have to hustle to make that money. And I think that that's really interesting because you still get that like yearning for something, but within the confines of pickup ball, there's nowhere to go. So you just are into the, you're ping-ponging around this, what seems to be this fairly small scene of pickup players, because eventually they start running into the same people, and those people recognize what's happening and aren't being hustled anymore and stuff. And it's almost, I mean, in socioeconomic terms, they're trapped, right? Like there are these folks who are staying in like extended stay motels or live in like crappy apartments, in, that like with dangerous neighbors or whatever. So in like socioeconomic terms, they're stuck, but in like, in terms of the game, they're also stuck too, because there's like no illusions that any of these people become pro in a legitimate way. So they have to have these kind of illegitimate operations to even like have some level of dignity in their game.
Yeah, it's you know, it reminds me a little bit. You kind of have a little bit of that in He Got Game, just like the, you know, going from like the more street basketball to a much more professional setting and what that means. You also kind of have that just in a more like labor sense. You know, that's like, you know, the whole like we're just going to make our own league and do pickup. You know, threatened and high flying bird. There's just kind of like you have more of that. Like it's a little bit more individual when it comes to like the pickup game rather than a much more structured setting.
Yeah, that is interesting because a characteristic of a lot of sports teams is like the individual within a team, right? Like Rudy, like we mentioned, like Rudy just wants to be part of the team.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's like this mystique surrounding the team, but in the context of pickup basketball, or like Bull Durham as a team too, you know.
Yeah.
But in the context of pickup basketball, you are by definition just by yourself. Like it's these people who are. Sorry, there's a very loud car passing. There are these people who are, you know, like flying solo by. You know, there's no way that they can't fly solo because on the next game, who knows how the players will shuffle, or who knows who may have left the court or not. Like, I don't know. There's something like weirdly individualistic about it, and I don't know. Like that is kind of like ultimately like an American fantasy as well. Like that, I think this movie kind of deflates in a lot of ways. This idea of like being like the great player and that being enough. Like it's, you know, you can't be an individual and have any sort of, you know, true upward mobility.
Mm-hmm.
It's good.
Yeah. Well, no,
good movie. Thanks, Reid.
Yeah, no, I highly recommend White Men Can't Jump. Also, like it's great. It's very entertaining. And like it's a very approachable sports movie.
Yeah. Also, Stanley Kubrick considered it one of his favorite films.
Wow.
Which,
did he give a number like top 10, top 50?
I can't track where he initially said it. Like I Googled it because I saw something on Letterboxd that people said this, and I Googled it and I found like different articles, but I couldn't I don't think he said this publicly. I think this was something he said to someone, and that someone posthumously, like after Kubrick's death, like mentioned, like actually told me he liked.
You got Kubrick. You got Kubrick and White
called Ron Shelton.
Yeah, he called Ron Shelton. You got Kubrick and White Men Can't Jump, and you got Terrence Malick and Zoolander. You know, gotta love the taste. Well, White Men Can't Jump is on Hulu, but don't watch the new one. Watch the 1992 film.
Yeah, I can't imagine the new one being good with Jack Harlow, who I have nothing against, but I also have nothing for. So
I don't know who he is, so that's what I got going for me.
He's a pop star dude.
Pop rapper.
Yeah.
Aren't we all?
You look at him and you're just like, I don't know. He's got what people call a punchable face. I wouldn't punch him because he probably can punch harder than me.
All right. Well, I'm gonna introduce Grace's pick for our next one.
Hi, Zach. Congratulations on 450 episodes of Cinematary. That is no small feat, and I congratulate you on Cinematary's longevity. Thank you for inviting me to participate in the celebration. I was assigned you for this episode. The film I picked for you is Miss 45. That's the obvious pun. Well, maybe not pun, but 450th Miss 45.
I didn't get that.
Look at her, yeah.
This is a movie that has been on my radar for a while, and one that I've just never had the opportunity or given myself the time to sit down and watch. So I picked this so that I would have to. So a good selfish excuse. I also hope that this is a movie that you've never seen before, although I know you've seen at least 449 films, so fancy 750. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the revenge narrative. We've talked sexploitation before on Cinematary, and I would like to hear your thoughts on, what comes after sexploitation. Is it revenge fantasy? And if you've seen it already, I hope that enough time has passed so that you can look at it with fresh eyes and gain a new perspective from it. I hope you approve of this pick. I hope you enjoy the movie, and I am looking forward to hearing your thoughts.
Thanks, Grace. This is definitely one that yeah, you need to like set some time to it's not, it's not a long movie, but it definitely starts it starts with a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but Michael maybe had the best time of all of us, and you maybe had the worst, just in terms of like heavy subject matter.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, Michael had the easiest time out of all of us, and it was one of those. It's a great exploitation movie. So like, you gotta appreciate a good exploitation movie. But for those unfamiliar, Miss 45, it's Abel Ferrara, which I don't know if I can be embarrassed. This is my first Abel Ferrara movie. So there's a double first. But it starts out, came out in 1981. It starts out with a seamstress who doesn't talk before like the first actions take place, and then proceeds not to talk the rest of the movie. I don't know if if she was talking before. I can't remember.
I think that you're supposed to think that she cannot speak.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was taking a lot of it like, oh, now she can't speak, which I thought was interesting, but that's fine too. Anyway, so she's a mute seamstress. She's leaving her job. Her friends are like, "Hey, come get a drink. Come hang out." And she's like, "No, I'm gonna go." And she goes and like get some groceries. And then when she's walking home, this masked man who is played by Abel Ferrara, which is what a choice to be like, I'm gonna do this in my movie.
It's a real Abel Ferrara choice.
Yeah, I guess so. Pulls her into an alleyway and rapes her, pointing a gun at her head the entire time. And then she, naturally very traumatized, is walking. At the same time, a guy is in her apartment, like rifling through her stuff. And so she gets back to her apartment, still very like disheveled, very, like her shirt is like open, like she's kind of like just got back home and is trying to like process what just happened to her. And this guy comes out from one of the rooms and then proceeds to start assaulting her and then rape her again. Which is a lot in the first 20 minutes of a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it's relatively graphic. But then it starts cooking, literally, where she picks up first she picks up like an object and like, kind of hits him and knocks him off of her, and then proceeds to pick up an iron, and great shot where she like lifts up the iron with like the kind of pointed side down and then stabs down. You just kind of hear a crack, and then you see two eggs fall into a pan on the stove, which just like, love it. Great. So then she has to like clean up her apartment, dispose of the body, and then is just kind of like traumatized to the point where she's seeing like the faces of these men, is like unable to kind of like go about her job anymore, just feels like she's constantly being followed. After she has killed the second guy who raped her, she picks up his gun and the rest of the movie is pretty much her. Anytime a guy hits on her, well, initially just anytime a guy like kind of gets her in a space where there's nobody else, she proceeds to shoot him. But as the movie goes along and she becomes more like just like consumed with the killing and just kind of taking this fantasy away from men, she just starts like seeking out men to kill, culminating in this big shootout that takes place during this Halloween party to end the movie. Like I said, I thought it was pretty great. It's it is like, I was thinking a lot of, I haven't watched this movie since it came out because I really didn't like it and thought it was silly, but it felt like kind of what Promising Young Woman wanted to be. Just in terms of like this rape revenge. It's a fascinating movie. I want to get Andrew, I want to get your perspective in a second, but it like, just in terms of like the viewer experience, like initially you're like, yeah, fucking kill these guys. These, like the way that Abel Ferrara like presents New York City, it's almost just like you just have like these male predators. Like every man in it is just like the worst and is just like this predatory figure. Because like a lot of the men that you see initially, even like her boss at her job, like her boss is like very like touching and kind of talking down to her, but then like on the street she like they're just constantly getting catcalled. There's men like just kind of like staring at them. And so, while the next two like killings that she does, you're just kind of like, I mean, okay. It's interesting how like because of what the trauma that happens at the beginning of the movie and how like you're immediately on her side, how your brain kind of has to like switch over and reperceive things as the movie goes along, because eventually you're kind of like, yeah, I feel awful for this woman, but then like she becomes a mass murderer. Like after a while you're just like, she's a mass murderer now. And like kind of like the process of it like turning on you in that way is fascinating. There's a really incredible shot, again, just kind of Abel Ferrara playing with cinematic history and our perceptions, where there's this guy who she's talking to at a bar, and she's on one of her killing sprees. This time she's dressed like Red Riding Hood. She has like this like black hood that she's walking around in. And he's like telling her about his wife and how he like thinks that something's going on with her. And then it cuts from them in the bar to them sitting outside, and he's talking more about how he followed her and he thought she was having this affair with this guy, but then he saw her with a woman. And like, and the seamstress is like really engaged in it, and then it almost seems like kind of like goes, oh, it's time, I have to kill him. Like, I've been like engulfed in this story, like I have to like kill him now. And like cocks the gun, and the guy sees it because a bullet doesn't come out, and it's just like, what are you doing? And then proceeds to like, because he thinks that there's no bullets in the gun, and she just she was done. He like points it at him, cocks it and fires it, kills him. But like the way that Ferrara like films the shot, you have the Brooklyn Bridge there, and he's taking the Manhattan image from Woody Allen, but like it's like this like twisted, like instead of being this kind of like romantic fantasy, it's this like romantic violence. And so there's a lot of that where he's just kind of he's playing on your perceptions of how like it's really this like this kind of twisted romantic, like this twist. You just have this twisting of violence and sex and courtship in general. That is just kind of, I really responded to it. I know you've seen this a couple times, Andrew, and I like that you went from like 1.5 star to I think like 3.5 or 4 stars. So
yeah, I want to hear the 1.5 star review first.
I don't remember. It was too long ago. I don't remember what my initial take on it was.
How old was this? Like, how would you describe your movie going? Like at the time you watched it the first time, was it like really young?
I think it was back in the days of UT Cinema Club, which was actually what this podcast was birthed out of. I think somebody showed it one night. It might have been Nadine, and maybe I just wasn't in the right headspace for it or whatever. But that was a movie that I was just kind of like not really knowing what I was going to get walking into it. So I responded very negatively the first time. But
you definitely have to be in a headspace for it. Like you can't just kind of go in cold on it.
Right. And I rewatched it still several years ago when I made my video essay about guns in horror movies, which if anyone has not watched, you should go watch. It's on YouTube. It's called Guns Don't Kill People, Knives Kill People. And I watched a bunch of rape revenge films for that video essay, and not a huge fan of the genre, to be honest. Like there's not a whole lot there for me. I don't find many of those movies to be particularly compelling or tastefully done. And by the time Miss 45 came out, early 80s, rape revenge was like an established genre. Like Last House on the Left came out in 1972. And there was a lot throughout the 70s. And so there was kind of this cottage industry of these movies that were kind of enticing people into the theater with the promise that you're going to see a woman get raped. And like kind of washing its hands clean of the moral ickiness of that by then giving you the second half of the film where the woman takes her revenge. And I think that one thing that makes Miss 45 really interesting is it complicates your relationship with both halves of that standard formula, right? Like the rape that is shown in the first half of the film is not shot in a way that is meant to be enticing even a little bit, right? Like it feels awful to watch. It's supposed to feel awful to watch, right?
Like in the way that a lot of the movie feels like it feels like almost like a John Waters movie, just in how it's shot and like presented. So it kind of like that's also was running through my mind.
Yeah. And then once you get to the second half of the movie, when she kind of becomes this vigilante, that isn't particularly empowering either, because you're just kind of seeing what this trauma and her decision to just kind of like combat that trauma with anger and violence, like how that affects other people negatively and how it affects her negatively. Like there's not really catharsis to be had in this film. So it's sort of like the movie kind of calls into question the validity or like the worth of like the entire genre that it exists within. And it's a really well-made version of that. I haven't seen it nearly as recently as you have, Zach, so I can't point to any particular like cinematic techniques or anything that it uses. But I remember the second time watching it just being really bowled over by the craft of the movie as well.
Yeah, it's really effective at just the thing I was thinking about was just kind of like how I mentioned Promising Young Women, and mainly I was thinking about like how a lot of this is like a lot of the not only like the rape itself or the rapes themselves, but also just the violence are presented. And there's just, it's stylized, but it's not stylized in how we would use that word for contemporary movies. Like I think when you think of like stylized violence, you immediately go to something like John Wick or even like Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is not like violent, but like stylized action. Or something like that, which has, or something like Mandy in terms of stylized, like that has
like aestheticized.
Yeah, that is violent, but you can see how manicured seems kind of dismissive, but like how manicured like you can see them like making the decision. This one feels like it's stylized, but it's really messy. Like you kind of feel like the people are just the bodies are falling where they fall. Like, it's not interested in like evoking it. It's there's almost like this emptiness that's supposed to be because it's just the person gets shot, and generally she shoots the person like 5 or 6 times. Like there's a scene there's one guy where she and her coworkers are like at this bar and they're eating and drinking, and this guy is just like literally like sticking his mouth in this other woman's mouth. It's like it's just like this obnoxiously disgusting like French kissing scene. And then he starts following them and hitting on them, and so then he continues to pursue our main character, and she like lets him lead her back to his apartment where he like kind of has like a whole he's like a photographer and has like this whole photo set up, and he like his door is an elevator, so he walks out of the elevator and she just starts firing at him, and he like gets hit and like turns, and like you just kind of see the body like flail down, and then she's like hitting it like 2 or 3 times, just kind of going like doom doom, and like the body's just kind of like, and like there's nothing like, you're just kind of like, you probably could have just fired it twice and been done with it, but there's just kind of like this excess and this like emptiness out of it. Like again, like it doesn't feel like, that's the problem. Like today is it's like you see John Wick like shoot somebody, and it's kind of cool. Like they make it look cool. They make it look like, oh, like, like look how he did that. And this one, none of the violence looks cool. It just looks cold, and it looks disturbing, and it looks and like to me that was just much more effective, because it's not to say that that these kind of contemporary movies with violence are doing it wrong necessarily, but like I feel like almost they're thinking about it too much. That you like that they forget that it's just like this cold, empty act that really kind of just sucks the humanity out of and that's what, to your point, like that when she becomes a vigilante, finally you kind of just turn on this person, because you're just like, no, you're like a mass murderer, because you've just watched her just kill man after man after man, and like her humanity just is getting like completely sucked out every time.
Right.
And so I was thinking a lot about that, just kind of watching it, not even, in a context of like, oh, this wouldn't work for a modern audience, because it wouldn't. It's a tough watch even, for me. But it also wouldn't fit, modernly, because I think it has a lot to say, but it's not doing that in a way that is telegraphing it, if that makes sense.
Well, it's also like it's a film that doesn't like fit neatly into a specific narrative, like a political or ideological narrative in that way. Like I can imagine if a movie like this was released today, it would either be, or probably both, like, the discourse surrounding it would be like, does it both sides, this issue, to present like the woman as like a mass murderer who, like, as, I don't know, the movie doesn't really make an equivalence, but like it does kind of set up in a dualism between like this mass murdering woman and like a number of rapists in the film, and like it defies like the kind of discourse that people have about films now, which is to figure out like what is the point. And I think this movie, like, it's not like this movie is nihilistic or brain dead or anything like that, but it doesn't have the points. And I haven't seen Promising Young Women, but like I heard all the time about like, oh, this is a movie that is about, and then insert, insert like topic for Slate article, right? And have either of you guys seen? I guess you haven't, Zach, since you haven't seen other Abel Ferraras. But have any of you guys seen The Driller Killer, which is the movie you made right before this? It's kind of the same thing with the slasher, in the sense of it like takes like what the slasher was, which at that point was still pretty young. I think it was like late 70s that he made that movie, and then like makes everything really symbolic, but also makes everything like drained of like the conventional things that are fun or supposed to be fun about a slasher. Those are the only 2 April 4-hour movies I've seen of his, and I'm curious like if he always does these kind of genre experiments where he like basically makes like the movie that like questions the genre itself.
Deflates our expectations.
Yeah, deflates the expectations. Although I will say that like I think Miss 45 is like really compelling as a movie. I haven't seen it in a few years, but it's really compelling as a movie. Like it's more compelling than like a more conventionally entertaining like rape revenge would be. And that's kind of like interesting in and of itself, is like it becomes a movie that is like really engaging to watch, like more so than the actual genre faithful would have been.
Yeah, it's I mean it's a fascinating movie, and that's just like not maybe as a rape revenge film, but like as a exploitation film, it's extremely effective. I mean, it follows along the same lines that you would be running into with, you know, a Pam Grier movie or something like that. Like it still has that like that you know, not just in like the violence, but also just the characters. Like she has her landlady who seems like Abel Ferrara borrowed off a John Waters set, who just is like very nosy, has this dog that's getting nosy, like you know, it's almost like this you know, like this kind of play off of like this Hitchcockian play off of things, like the dog's getting, you know, like the dog in Rear Window that's, you know, sniffing the where he buried the you know, the body and stuff. Like you have that. I mean, there's another. I just pulled that out. I didn't think of that during the movie. There's another like kind of cinematic connection that you have there. But you know, it also just kind of has like it's like one of those great like 70s 80s just like seedy New York movies, like New York feel, you know, it feels very much of like the, you know, Taxi Driver is a super obvious connection to make to it. I saw some people on Letterboxd kind of be like, it's female Taxi Driver. But like it also, you know, it reminds me more of just like almost something like Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, the original, where you just kind of have like this variety of character who all kind of have like a degree of morality that's kind of burned away somewhat, all just kind of in this kind of nastiness. Like there's just like nothing feels clean or complete in this New York City that you're seeing in Miss 45.
I think like that's something that's really interesting about like that specific period of exploitation filmmaking, when like a lot of it was like bordering on like almost like verite style, like low budget filmmaking, where I think part of a lot of those movies are kind of hard to parse in terms of genre, like because a lot of the like genres that we think of coming out of exploitation, like slasher or like some of those other ones like crime thriller, like they kind of get really sleek in the 80s and kind of codified as genres in the 80s, but in the 70s they're all really weird and shaggy, and you have these sort of like this like feel of unpredictability surrounding them, because it feels like the sets themselves, or if they're even sets, the locations are alive and like uncontained. And like Miss 45 and like the Driller Killer both have that, like where it feels like that they just like picked up a camera and we're like, we're just gonna walk down the street and you're acting, but who knows what else is gonna be in this shot.
Yeah.
Which is very John Watersy too, by the way. Like that.
Yeah, I felt a lot of like John Waters in this movie more than anything.
I think scuzzy is the word.
Yeah.
Because like Abel Ferrara also just captures just like those, like the landlady kind of reminds you of what's the woman who plays the woman who's in the crib in
in Pink Flamingos. It's
Flamingos.
Edith Massey, is that her name?
Yeah. She, like I thought that was her for a while. I was like, that reminds me, just like that's. I thought that was her.
I wish it had been her. That would have been amazing.
That would have been so much fun. But then you just also have these strange faces and strange people who just pop up. Like in the climax scene, you have this one couple and they're arguing because she, after the last kid they had, she wanted him to get a vasectomy and he decided not to. And you have like this like minute scene where they're arguing over that. It's just like it just kind of drops you in like a lot of the dialogue. The dialogue's not good. It feels like it's an exploitation movie, but like it has that like it has like that John Waters dialogue where it's not good, but they're like also purposefully being as like disgusting as possible.
Like camp, but like X-rated camp.
Yeah, it's great. And so like, you kind of have that as well. It's even like, which works for like the guys that are like, stalking and hitting on her, or like the two rapists, well, the two rapists feel much more like they're playing to that. But then like you also like the other ones feel like on the same level, because like just the way they talk is just like this X-rated camp, and you're just like, nobody who talks like that. Like in just a normal setting.
You mentioned the faces too, and there is something magical about not just exploitation cinema, 70s cinema in general has like the most incredible looking people, like not like conventionally attractive people, but like faces that haunt you. And we need to bring that back. Like, when's the last time you looked at a film and like a person's face haunted you, not because they were like hot, but because you just can't look away at the way that like their face is shaped, or their hair is grown, or whatever. Like, I don't know. Like,
I think anything with Dane DeHaan, maybe.
No,
who's that kid? Barry Keoghan.
That's what I was gonna say. I'm like, who's really good at that is Barry Keoghan. That dude has a face. Like and it's always
the magical thing about the 70s though was that like it seemed like every other actor had had a face.
Yeah.
Like where did all the faces go?
No, everybody has to be pretty.
They all got concentrated into Barry Keoghan.
Yeah.
That's it. He's just the living avatar of like 70s faces. That's good.
Yeah, no, that's exactly who I was thinking of. I was like, Barry Keoghan has like a face like that, where like it's always kind of different, and like it always can like go demented in 5 seconds, and then go like back to sad. It's great. Well, Miss 45. I don't know if you like exploitation movies. I recommend it. It is definitely like put yourself in a headspace for it. It's not easy. Thank you, Grace. I guess I should have done a little bit more reading. I did read the synopsis before, so I could be somewhat prepared. I didn't like go in completely cold, but it's on Canopy and it's on Peacock if you would like to stream it. All right, well, let's finish it up. We got Seth picking for Andrew.
Here we go.
And
I'm so excited to watch this video.
And I haven't watched. I didn't watch any of these videos, so I don't know what Seth has in store for us.
Hello, Andrew. Come in, Andrew. I have an urgent mission for you. I've done what I can with it. I don't know if I failed. It's too complicated now. Things have gotten away. But if you're hearing this, already too late. And I need to pass it on to you to make some sense of it. The film is more a communication from the stars. Wax, the discovery of television among the bees. The very first film to be broadcast on the internet. And yeah, it's a really good action movie. I think you'll like it. It's funny. If you're watching this, it's already too late.
God.
Well, Seth easily wins for like understanding the assignment.
For podcast listeners, Seth was holding a
No. Podcast listeners don't get in this. They gotta watch the YouTube stream. Exclusive content.
Yeah, it's all good. No, you should. Yeah. I thought he was in a bee. I thought he was like in a beehive or something. I thought he was like among bees, like he had one of those bee hats on. I was like, Jesus, he went for it. All right.
If only. No, thank you, Seth. That was incredible. And this pick was incredible. I was hoping that I would get Seth as the person who assigns me a movie, because I knew that he would assign me some crazy bullshit like this. So yeah, the movie, as Seth said, as you can see on the screen, YouTube people, is Wax, or the discovery of television among the bees. This movie came out in 1991. It was broadcast live on the internet in 1993, before there was any semblance of video streaming in the world. And man, this movie is something else. I don't really feel like I am quite up to the task of explaining it because it ultimately cannot be explained, I think. I think any attempts to explain it will just become this like recursive fractal thing that goes on forever. So I'm going to try to not go on literally forever, but I am probably going to talk a long time because I've been doing like a deep dive of research on the guy who made this movie, David Blair. And I would actually like to give my research about him before I talk about the movie.
I just want to say real quickly, this is giving me episode like, what was it 300? This is giving me end of Evangelion vibes.
Oh right, yeah. This is really 100%. Like a movie picked up to par with Nadine asking me to watch End of Evangelion. Yeah.
Okay.
But you're sober this time.
I'm completely sober, right? But that's not going to help. That's not going to help me explain this movie.
It might actually make it worse, to be honest.
Yeah, if I was like a little bit more like attuned with the cosmos, it might be easier. But the reason I want to talk about the director is because I think it is important to know what kind of mind this movie came from. So here's my research that I've done. So David Blair. I watched this movie on David Blair's personal YouTube channel, which is called, if you would like to go check it out, The First Movie on the Internet. That YouTube channel has 489 subscribers, which I think is maybe less than Cinematary. Hold on. How many subscribers does Cinematary have?
I think we have more than him.
We do. Cinematary has more subscribers
than
David Blair. Anyways, the first video on this YouTube channel was uploaded 14 years ago. And nothing else was uploaded until 4 years ago. So for 10 years, nothing existed on this YouTube channel except a video titled How, quote, Waxweb, unquote, works, brackets www.waxweb.org. If you go to waxweb.org, you will find that it is Blair's personal website. It is like all black with just like a video player up top, and it just has like a ton of videos that you can cycle through that have like essentially no like labels or descriptions or anything like that. They are also just like incomprehensible in and of themselves. And a lot of them are just clips of wax that have been slowed down or otherwise manipulated. He also has a website called The First Movie on the Inter.net, which has no images on it, but the word logo is in plain text in the top left corner of the website. And it features this paragraph of text in which Blair explains his thoughts on movies in general. I would like to read you the first sentence of that paragraph, if you don't mind. Here's what David Blair has to say about movies. All movies are mysteries of people and places and thoughts in motion of time, of psychophysics. That is to say, within and between the flickering persistence of still images across the gap of frames. Or if you don't have frames, well, then substitute the immaterial mystery of objects not existing across flowing matrices of conjoined number changes. And so that resolved, well, all movies are mysteries of people, of places, of things, of times, of mysteries not in front of us, of talk abandoned to the sudden appearance of the future in the present of the past, and also in the persistence of memory, the persistence of association, the persistence of links, the persistence of culture, the persistence of property, whatever you want. It's all there when you fall asleep at the wheel. And if you are still there, then it is still there when you wake up a second later. Wow! Exclamation point.
I can fuck with that.
What a king.
That's awesome. 100% cosign. Yeah.
Wow. The header of this website reads in all caps, "The cinema of a 1,000-year movie," which I think is in reference to this ongoing project that is elsewhere referred to as the first movie on the internet. This is kind of confusing to me. I don't know if I totally have it figured out, but people refer to Wax as the first movie on the internet because it was the first movie that was live streamed. But I think he's making this other whole ongoing project that is unrelated to Wax, that is called The First Movie on the Internet. I like the title, The Cinema of a 1,000-Year Movie, because a lot of this movie is being released in segments, and a lot of these segments are long. So Letterboxd has a log for volume E of this project, and that is 999 minutes, or 30 plus hours. When Wax first premiered, Blair said that he was working on a different film entirely for his follow-up, not the first movie on the internet or the Cinema of a 1,000-Year Movie. He said he was working on a movie called Jews in Space, but he did not release that. I think
probably a good move.
Oh my gosh!
I think he himself is Jewish. I want to believe that. I watched a little bit of his most recent volume that was uploaded on YouTube, which he's continuing to upload, and the most recent one came out just 9 days ago, and it references Jews a lot. Ooh. And I couldn't tell if it was doing so in a malicious way. But so I think that he's just really into history and geopolitics. I don't know.
That's what they all say, though.
That's what they all say. Yeah. But the first movie on the internet that being released in volumes, Volume A, Volume B, Volume C. But as Blair has gotten closer to the end of the alphabet, he has realized that he needs to split those volumes up even further. So every individual volume has its own sub label, where like there's a volume OA, OB, OC, all the way to Z before he moves on to the next letter in the volume. By the way, he publishes these on YouTube in 240p. And the most recent volume just consists of Blair talking about this obscure like geopolitics stuff with subtitles placed directly in the center of the screen. And his website, this is the last thing I'll say about Blair before I get into Wax, I promise. His website also links to a thing called all caps paper movie, lowercase s, which is this forever long index of links to videos in a series, one of which I loved the name of. It was called How I Stole the Telepathic Cinema of America. And
that's where it went.
and all of these videos, almost all these videos, are just like 5 seconds long, and they are just like strobing text. Like it's like he has scanned a page from a book and made it like a millisecond of a video, and like just compiled like 100 pages and compressed them into like 5 seconds. So if you wanted to slow these things down and read them, you theoretically could do that. I am choosing to believe that Blair made these just like for the aesthetic effect, kind of like this Stan Brakhage like flicker of like things running by you, as opposed to hoping that people would actually read these. I'm also hoping he didn't write them. I'm hoping he just compiled this text from other places and made a cool like collaborative or a collage art thing out of them. But I wouldn't put it past him if he did.
You may have stumbled upon like a House of Leaves-esque like manuscript right now.
So anyways, that's the mind of David Blair, or as much of it as I could really wrap my head around in the 45 minutes I had between watching this movie and doing this podcast. Here's what Wax is about. I'm gonna do my best, people. This is tough. So it opens with a backstory about these researchers around like the turn of the century, around the time that film is being invented as a technology, and these researchers whose names are James Maker. He goes by Hive Maker because he deals with bees. Ellis Baralam and Zoltan Abbasid. And they are trying to communicate with the dead using cinematography, which is elsewhere referred to in the movie as ectoplasmic cinematography. And this is kind of presented to us as like a pseudo documentary And the narrator of the documentary is himself like a character in like a fictional character in the story. His name is Jacob Maker. He is the grandson of James Hivemaker. And his wife is the grandchild of Ellis Barolum, who is also James Hivemaker's half sister. So the protagonist is like married to a distant, not so distant relative. And the documentarian Jacob is both a beekeeper and some sort of engineer for the U.S. military. He designs and monitors / maintains these flight simulations for Air Force pilots. And I think it becomes increasingly clear over the course of the movie that specifically the flight simulators that he is constructing are for like drone strikes. Though those words are never said directly in the movie. And he says, speaking of like him keeping bees, he says that he doesn't harvest honey. He just enjoys watching the bees, which is a thing that becomes increasingly important over the course of the film. At one point in the movie, he goes into a fugue-like state while looking at the bees, and it translates into this vision where he imagines himself at his childhood home, which was in a place referred to as the Garden of Eden. And in this vision, he goes in his childhood home and he finds his grandfather's diary, and he reads the grandfather's diary, and the grandfather has left him a message. And like by reading the message, he has another vision. So it's kind of like in Mist when like you find a book and you open it up and there's like a low res video of somebody talking to you. He then goes home and watches television. He has the realization that the human soul can fragment and decay. He then says that he has a vision where he sees that the dead are in the sky and that he is their target, but that his beekeeping suit would protect him. He then begins having a moral crisis about the ethics of his job, but then he decides to head towards the moon. And that is a little unclear to me how exactly he goes about doing that. He goes to the moon. He realizes that the dead want him dead. And so he is going to kill them before they can kill him. And while he's saying this, by the way, there's this zoom in on like this flat virtual US Capitol building. And I should probably pause here to mention like the style of this movie, which is like a mishmash of really low res, like consumer grade VHS tape video, mostly of like the guy, David Blair, just kind of like walking around the New Mexico desert, and like really primitive late 80s, early 90s, like 3D image rendering. And like so much of the movie is you seeing these like gray 3D models just sort of floating and spinning in like this black void. And even in the parts where you're not looking at those 3D models, he will find ways to digitally manipulate the like low res, like live action video, so that there's all sorts of crazy effects going on with it. It actually reminds me of a lot of like Zoomer memes, where the humor comes from like low res picture quality, unnecessary zooms, unnecessary close-ups, these nonsensical transitions and overlay effects. There's like one section where there's just like a bevel on the outside of the image for no discernible reason. And there's one point in the movie where the image that you're watching kind of folds in half and then like flaps like a bird across the screen. Like it just has all these really ridiculous, like, you know, if Windows Movie Maker was 10 times crazier sort of effects.
I want to point out though that he's doing this in like whenever he was making this, early 90s or whatever, before this was consumer grade, like default settings on programs we all had. Like, I think it's genuinely impressive.
What computer must he had made this on? Like, there were home desktop computers did not really exist at this point, right? Like, that was more
they did exist, but they didn't have these sorts of things that you could do on them.
Right. Yeah. So the fact that this movie exists at all, and let alone was streamed online in 1993, is kind of a wonder to behold. But it does just kind of continue going on like that of just spiraling into like further and further outer layers of absurdity. I took copious notes of things that happen in this movie because I was trying to make any sort of sense of it. And I'm not going to be able to read all of the plot points that I mapped out. But I will say that at one point, like a very pivotal moment in the movie is when the bees place they pierce the side of the protagonist's head and they insert what he calls a mirrored crystal, which looks like this endlessly spinning like Dungeons and Dragons dice, and that leads him to discovering television amongst the bees, and he ends up going to like a television planet at one point. He also goes to he finds a library. It's like a Russian Orthodox Church library. He meets a priest there, and the priest tells him there are demons in the desert. And he also tells him that there are bees 40 miles north. And that's where the U.S. military tested their first plutonium bombs. he eventually also like has a vision in which he learns that he himself is what's called a Trinity site, which I think is the name for the place where the U.S. military tested a lot of their first like really like extreme bombs, and the bees, by way of BTV, they show him a movie called The Garden of Eden Cave, which is an anagram. It eventually scrambles into The Vengeance of the Dead, I think. And in this movie, he himself stars in the movie, but he's not himself. He is a sentient plutonium bomb, the first plutonium bomb named Fat Boy, which I think is probably actually the name that the U.S. military gave the first plutonium bomb. I don't know.
It is. It was one of the bombs dropped on Japan in World War II, right? It was.
Okay.
I don't remember if that was Nagasaki or Hiroshima, but that was a real bomb.
Okay, good to know. There's a lot of like identity blurring in this movie. Like he learns later on in the movie that he himself is Zoltan Abbasid, one of the like ancestors of his wife, and that he, when he was Zoltan Abbasid, studied a language that was a rival of Esperanto, and he used it to reconstruct the language of Cain from the Bible, which was what was spoken at the Tower of Babel, apparently. He also finds out, like in the very last minutes of the movie, well, I guess I should mention the other identity he shifts into before he shifts into his last identity. He eventually has to kill somebody, and in killing somebody, he is given a new body, and that new body is just like a 3D model of the letter X, but it has 4 heads on the end, and every head is a different identity. One head is him. One head is him in the past, Zoltan Abbasid, and the other 2 heads are these unnamed Iraqi characters who were killed in I think what we have to presume is a drone strike carried out by the protagonist. And like that would be a really that would be a dark and weird enough note to end on. But then like the actual last note involves him saying, "I'm a woman now." Actually, several women. And then he's like showing you this woman
Shaka
like
Khan.
She's a yeah, I'm every woman. That's right. And these women are genetic researchers who are studying mutations in corn. We learn that these women are sisters of two men who work at a flight simulation company called the Tower of Babel, which I think we're supposed to think is like the name of the protagonist's military operation. I don't know. And so it's like the number of identities and the number of like people at the center of the story are like budding off of one another or something like that. And apparently at the Tower of Babel flight simulation company, they are currently working on a two-way television intended to communicate with the dead. And they have successfully done this. The dead tell them that they will be allowed to live in peace for the next 1,000 years. And everyone believes this, or like the two women that the protagonist has become believe this because they love their brothers. And the movie ends with the line, "That's the power of love." And, of all the movies to end with the line, "That's the power of love," I was not expecting Wax or The Discovery of Television Amongst the Bees to be it. I don't know, y'all. Like, this movie is fucking crazy. This movie is. I had to take notes, because if I wasn't taking notes, I don't think that I would have followed it with any sort of attention, because it all kind of like blurs together into this like really cryptic, abstract nonsense. And like I believe that it probably means something about the way that like drone warfare like alienates us from the actual violence that we commit. I get the sense that maybe, if this was like a puzzle box movie with like a key that I could turn and solve it, it might be something like the protagonist, he works for the U.S. military. He has to carry out these drone strikes, and he's morally conflicted about it. So he kind of creates this whole delusion in his head of like all the reasons why he has to do this drone strike that have nothing to do with him like working for an evil empire, and instead are because like the bees on the moon told him to. Like maybe that's the clearest explanation I can give you for what's going on here.
Sounds like a multiverse movie. It's also the first multiverse movie.
The first multiverse. Yeah, there's a lot of universes and a lot of planets. There's actually a planet inside the Earth in this movie, and that planet is the land of the dead. So there's like a mythological undertone to it too, or like you can just like literally walk to the land of the dead. There's all the Tower of Babel, Cain and Abel, Garden of Eden stuff going on. I don't know. Michael, you've seen this movie. You actually just rewatched the first 30 minutes of it. Do you have any more light to shed on the situation?
I actually watched it at Seth's recommendation as well. Before I say it, I do want to correct myself. Fat Man was the bomb dropped on Nagasaki, so I don't know what Fat Boy is.
Okay.
That was going to bother me if I didn't say it, but I watched it because I have this list on Letterboxd that's basically these are movies that feel like the work of Thomas Pynchon. And Seth commented on that and suggested this movie. And
good pick for that.
It truly does. It more than maybe any other movie that I've seen, like, feels like that kind of like fevered dream logic / absurdity / like something gravely serious on a geopolitical level, like that Thomas Pynchon often like taps into. You explained way more of this movie than I remembered, because there's like a deadening effect watching this movie.
Yeah.
Because like you described the style, but like I have to just like emphasize like how difficult the style makes it to follow what's going on, what is already a very absurd thing going on. Like
there's no solid ground.
There's no solid ground. It's like watching, I don't know if you guys have ever watched like a YouTube conspiracy theorist, like those documentaries. Like I'm not talking about like just a guy in front of a mic, but like people will make like documentaries as like, here's how Armageddon's going to happen, or like here's why like the U.S. military is, you know, secretly controlled by lizard people or whatever. Like I don't know if you guys have ever watched those types of things on YouTube, but like it feels like that, where in a modern context it feels like something that is extremely amateur, and from the like we mentioned already, like using all these effects that like now scan as like ironically like basic, you know, like someone hits like the oh, this is a cool transition on PowerPoint, like sort of thing. But like it's weird to think about how much effort it would have taken to make that. Like it's a weirdly it's a digital movie that feels like now feels retro, but it was like deeply and uncannily futuristic at the time. And but watching it had it, I don't know, it's already so strange, and the guy's narration is this kind of droning, like monotone.
And
like
it's just him the whole time. There's no
Zoltan
anybody else.
What was that guy's name? Zoltan Abasan. Like there's like certain phrases that like worm their way into your head because they're said so many times by this guy. Or like bees is another one. The way that the guy pronounces bees, the bee is like these bees. Like I don't know. Like it's just a weird aesthetic experience. I also watched it late at night and fell asleep during it, and then rewatched part of it later on. I don't know. It's like truly unlike anything I've ever seen that is like supposed to be cinematic, and like it feels like a YouTube shitpost or like that sort of thing. Like, but that thing didn't exist in 1991.
But now he's just doing that. Like now you go to his website and it's just like him talking to the camera about geopolitics.
Yeah, and it is truly like I do think like whenever I watched it, I got the impression that it was in like all the drone stuff was in reference to the Gulf War, which I mean makes sense in terms of that war, which was like very low on American casualties, but was fairly horrific for the Iraqis. And I don't remember anything specific that drew my attention to that, but like my impression, like looking back at my Letterboxd and like thinking back on my memories of this movie, is that it feels like kind of like a psychological freak out over like the end of the Cold War and the Gulf War presenting the first true like open American aggression without the threat of the Soviet Union. And then like him having like a kind of existential freak out about that, and to be living in a world in which like there's virtually nothing to stop the United States from just having like imperialist like military hegemony over the world because of its technology is allowing it to wage war in ways that like had been like hinted at throughout the Cold War, but now was unimpeded by any like matching geopolitical force. And it's really interesting to me as that, and I wish, I don't know, like I wish. It's just I don't know, like for me it was a difficult sit. Like it's a movie I found like more interesting to reflect on than to like watch, but it's so wild, like it's so incredibly wild.
I definitely recommend people watch at least parts of it. Like just
it's truly YouTube, singular.
Skip around. You don't necessarily need to watch the whole thing, but if you want to experience that like gradual existential freak out that this movie is giving you, it is definitely a singular experience.
I do think like if I'm gonna like try to like parse theme wise, like there is something about like the way that America presents itself as like an ahistorical entity, and especially like after the Cold War had ended, when there was no like ideological pushback against like American like neoliberal capitalism.
Right.
Like that, and the term that gets used by oh man, what was that guy's name? He wrote the book like coining the term "the end of history," which is that like this is as good as mankind gets is liberal capitalism or liberal democracy, like is the word, but it's basically neoliberal capitalism in the parlance of the 90s. And like this sense that like we have arrived, like this is like the apex of like the way that a state can be organized. And the way that that assumption like kind of erased like most of the 20th century in the minds of Americans. Like I remember growing up and you would hear like the highlights of the Cold War, like the Cuban Missile Crisis, and then Ronald Reagan told him to tear down the wall, and then it was gone. But like the way that the world is now is defined by what the United States and the Soviet Union broadly did during those years that are functionally erased from like American history, because America won and got to erase that.
And do the erasing and tell those stories through mass media, right?
Which exactly, like Rambo and
like using the weird B television to control your mind.
Right, yeah, you go back and watch like media from the 70s and 80s or 60s or whatever, and it's like suffused with like the kind of like geopolitics of the time, whether that was like, you know, the like kind of student protests or Vietnam or like Rambo or things like that. But like what the movie does in a weird like mythological way is like connect where America was at the beginning of the 90s to the beginning of time, like as if to say like, no, America is not this like sui generis like new apex of human civilization. It's a manifestation of these historical forces that we don't acknowledge, and the only way to acknowledge them is through like weird subterfuge and bizarre like bleeding edge technology that like the military, like that the mainstream refuses to acknowledge exists. In a weird way, it reminds me of the X-Files, which is also kind of doing the same thing. Like the X-Files is all about what the what the U.S. military did during the Cold War and the FBI did during the Cold War, which was entangled with aliens and all this sort of weird stuff in the X-Files. But like thematically, it's like that. And the only way to like that the show can like reconcile it is it like goes this ancient aliens route, and it's weird. And I don't know, there is something weirdly compelling about that to me, because I'm someone who in my adult life keeps reading history and stuff and realizing like there is this other history. And it's not even like it's history that would have been considered mainstream 50 years ago that we just aren't taught anymore. And it's weird. I don't know, the movie's kind of compelling to me on that regard, even though watching it put me to sleep.
Yeah. I think that the like hypnotic quality of the movie kind of adds to that feeling like you're hearing something you shouldn't be hearing. You're like, this is like obscure secret knowledge. You know?
It also is like it's just a couple years before or wait, maybe it's the same year. When did JFK come out? It has that kind of, I don't know, there's something
JFK
about like
the same year.
Oh yeah, the early 90s, like there's something about like the end of the Cold War that made America in pop culture like manifest these incredibly paranoid visions of America itself. Like you have like JFK, you have the X-Files, you've got like, I mean, Twin Peaks is not exactly this, but Twin Peaks is this idea of like there is this kind of like all-American veneer hiding this like broad global and like cosmological conspiracy, basically. Like there's something interesting to be said about like the kind of like American psyche, and like this is the same psyche that birthed Alex Jones as like a media figure. And
this is what trips me up though about David Blair, is that like I can't see that much distance between him and something like Alex Jones. I mean, he's not like conning people in the same way that Alex Jones is.
But the wild thing about Alex Jones is he's sometimes right. Like, I don't mean this in the sense of saying like we should listen to him, but like the thing about there being this intensely mainstream version of American history is that it invites and like necessitates a sort of like counter narrative to it that is often like extremely like specious, but like the only way, it's almost like exploitation cinema in the same, and like a lot of that, like because of like the kind of like vice grip of like American like, you know, morality policing, the only way to like talk about certain issues was through exploitation cinema. And there's a lot of like garbage and like really harmful stuff in exploitation cinema but also that's the only way to see like what John Waters was doing in like queer movies and stuff like that. And there's something about like the 90s too, and like the Clinton era, where the only way to talk about America's presence in the world is through this portal that gets you both Alex Jones and whatever this movie is.
Well, I mean, I think that you've done maybe a better job explaining it than I have, Michael, and you haven't even watched.
No, I think your like beat by beat summary of like it's probably like a third of the movie.
I feel like I liked it.
Like, it's so entertaining to read, like hear about what this movie is. Like, it is. I had my mic muted, but I was cracking up. Like, it's so entertaining.
Happy to share.
All right, well, I guess go to David Blair's website if you want to, or his YouTube that we, lord over with all our subscribers. If you would like to watch Wax or the Discovery of Television Among the Bees,
waxworks.org or the first movie on the inter.net.
Yeah. Any thoughts on 450 episodes? I yawn because I'm tired. It's been
a lot of episodes, man. I like this switching it up of how we're doing the celebratory episode. This was fun. We're gonna have to come up with something really good for 500.
We got 50 episodes. Yeah, we'll think of something. We'll figure it out.
Do you want to tell the people what we're doing next?
Yeah, we're gonna be jumping into everybody's favorite summertime series, and that's Young Critics Watch Old Movies.
I think it's time to acknowledge that we're not young critics anymore.
Yeah, we are all in our 30s.
The posture of this podcast for like several years now has been grumpy about the trajectory of contemporary cinema.
Yeah. We're not the youths.
We spent a good portion of the Miss 45 talking about how this movie couldn't be released today, and if it was, people wouldn't get it.
That's just me. Like that's what everything turns into at this point. All right,
old critics watch older movies.
Yeah, well, not old, so it's like we're not really middle aged either. In between
grown ass critics.
Yeah,
grown critics.
Grown critics who pay taxes watch old movies and pay mortgages, or something. I don't know. So we're deciding this year, because democracy's dead, it's a sham in our neoliberal capitalistic society. We're not letting you vote this year. We just picked some movies, so fuck you, I guess.
If you'd like to vote, you can vote with your dollars by giving us more money.
Yeah, you can do that. Make us watch whatever movie you want to by just becoming.
It's $1. Like, you can give us $1 and we'll watch something fucking stupid.
Look, in a post-Citizens United world, that's the best way that you have the sway. Like what's going to happen in your world.
Listen, big movie took us over and made us watch this. But anyway, so we're keeping the format to a degree. We're not going to be doing because of the release schedule. We're not going to be doing 1 week American, 1 week foreign language, or 1 week English language, 1 week foreign language. But we thought we came up with a list from the 20s or the 80s of like stuff that is. It's not completely off base. It's stuff that has appeared a lot of times on our, for the most part, like on our ballots that just seems to kind of miss it, including our first pick, which, we just got to reckon with it. But I'll go through it real quickly. We got 1920s, The Jazz Singer. 1930s, All Quiet on the Western Front. 1940s, Children of the Paradise. 1950s, Wild Strawberries. 1960s, Harakiri. 1970s Sallow, which I don't know what fucking asshole did that one. And 1980s Fast Times at Ridgemont High to get the Sallow out of our system. But that's our list. We'll have it. Sorry that democracy's gone, y'all, but I think it's a good list. It's a lot of movies that I'm looking at least half of it I have not seen. So.
I haven't seen almost any of those movies.
Yeah, I've not seen several of them.
So
looking forward to Sallow.
We got that. We got some. We're dealing with some Bergman. We're dealing with The Jazz Singer. I'm super pumped for All Quiet on the Western Front because
me too.
That movie fucking slaps.
A list weirdly in conversation with 2022 in the cinema between Babylon and then the
it's true.
All Quiet remake.
We might have to save a Babylon discussion because I know Michael has thoughts on that, and I
remember your thoughts.
Yeah, I have. I don't know. That's why we're in between critics who have mortgages to pay, because I don't agree with the youths who watched Babylon and thought they were watching something incredible.
Tune in to whatever episode we talk about that.
Yeah. All right. Until next episode. Thank you for 450. We'll see you next time.
Bye.